Okay. I think we're live. Welcome back to Tailosive Tech live on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. It's been basically a week since my last live stream. There's been a lot of issues between my throat and feeling sick and technical difficulties behind the scenes. I still haven't completely resolved all of those things, but I think I've got enough to make a somewhat stable live stream. So yeah, this is the first official stream I've done with continuity camera, which means that it's from my iPhone 13 lens. And I don't know if it comes across in the live stream or not, but to me, it looks frickin' crispy as heck. This is miles better than the webcams that I used to use straight off the MacBook Pro or straight off the iMac Pro. You know, it's still 1080p. Currently, continuity camera maxes out at 1080p 30 FPS. So I hope that in the future, if they do end up making a USB-C or Thunderbolt iPhone, they could get that higher to maybe 4K or maybe 60 frames a second. That would be great. But my God, even for 1080 at 30, it looks fantastic. And this was a feature I feel very catered to, and very much like Apple listened, because I've been asking for it for years. In fact, just a couple months ago, I included it in my... You know, I guess they added it via macOS, but at the time I called it an iOS 16 feature request. I was really hoping for Apple to add this to iOS, and basically what I was asking for was delivered, even though it was technically through macOS. But here's the main reason I wanted it. Thank you, Halami, for your support as a supporter. Yeah, we can turn on center stage. We can mess around with all the kinds of Ventura features they've added. So I've been testing it out for the past week. I did... the last Tailosive Tech and EV podcast using continuity camera. So if you noticed a bump in quality in the video podcast, that's why. But I should preface some things during the beginning of the stream. Obviously, we don't have to talk about just continuity camera the whole time. You guys can ask about whatever you want, tech-related, of course, and I'll do my best to answer. But it is still in beta. macOS Ventura is not out of beta yet, and because I don't put betas on my primary work computer, I am doing this through my iMac Pro right now. So I cannot just suddenly switch to the MacBook Pro webcam. And that also means I'm not using my MacBook Pro microphone. This was another detail they did not bring up during DubDub. Continuity camera not only captures the video from your iPhone, but also your audio. So I have that option selected right now. You're hearing me through the iPhone's microphone and seeing me. And I've been using it for quite a while, but I have to admit that the beta does still show some bugs here and there. And in my testing of this live stream, most of the time it works fine. Like I'd say 95 to 98% of the time it works flawlessly, and it works really well and reliably, and the image is clear and the connection is solid. But I have still run into this bug where the iMac will disconnect from the Wi-Fi, and obviously that will cause the stream to lag and buffer. And usually it reconnects right away. Usually, you know, it drops Wi-Fi and then it takes a second to reconnect. And I guess because continuity camera is partially powered through Wi-Fi, when the Wi-Fi disconnects off the iMac, the camera disconnects. Normally it's able to catch itself and reconnect everything within 20 or 30 seconds. So the only reason I wanted to kick off the stream with that is just to preface, this is a day one developer beta. It's not even a public beta. And it's the first iteration of the developer beta. So it's honestly impressive how stable it is for day one, considering my favorite feature from macOS last year with Monterey was universal control. And they didn't have universal control ready for many months. It took basically a whole year before universal control was actually working properly. Whereas this, on day one, seems to be working fairly well, but again, it's not 100% yet. It could be a problem with the Intel processor in the iMac Pro, you know, the fact that I'm using continuity camera with an iMac that's almost 4 years old. Or no, it's over 4 years old now. It's almost 5 years old. Maybe that's why the Wi-Fi is being problematic. So maybe that problem will go away once macOS Ventura officially rolls out and I can put it on my MacBook Pro, since that's Apple Silicon. That has Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6 might work better with continuity camera. So I apologize in advance if I drop connection or start buffering during this live stream. Hey, Thank you for the super chat, Ben. He says sound is great and colors really pop. Image is incredible. I'm very much happy with it so far, considering that hopefully it will remain more stable in the future and we don't have any frame drops. But in all my testing, I wasn't able to completely eliminate the frame drop. So there's a good chance that 30 minutes in, 45 minutes in, or 50 minutes into this live stream, at some point, I may start buffering, and I just ask that you remain patient. It should fix itself within a couple seconds. There's nothing I can do. This is beta software. We're testing it out, so it may not be flawless. But in my opinion, for a dev beta, it's still pretty freaking good. I'm very, very happy with it. Far better than any webcam I've ever used, Mac or PC. And the fact that it works wirelessly is spooky good. Like, I have the iPhone plugged in right now, but I can disconnect the lightning cable and it just takes a second to switch over to wireless, and it works from very far away. You can, I don't know why Apple says continuity camera needs to be like near the Mac, because you can select the iPhone as your webcam and take it like 10, 15 feet away from the computer, and it will still maintain a fairly stable image quality. It's not HDR. There's a specific file for that. Is there a wired option? There is, but there's not much control over it, Chicken Fat. Basically, if you have your iPhone plugged in and you're using the iPhone as a webcam, I assume it's using wired, but it's kind of hard to tell because it performs and behaves in pretty much the exact same way whether you use it wired or wireless. It's kind of like macOS Sidecar on the iPad in that way. It technically can work over wired, but there's nothing in Control Center, there's nothing in options that says just use the wired connection. Only use wired. Like, I can't force it to use wired. So I don't know if it's charging the phone but capturing the video feed wirelessly. It's kind of hard to tell. But in Control Center on the iMac, it does give me several different of the continuity camera features to work with. So desk view, I saw a few of you guys asking for the top-down view thing. That doesn't appear to be working yet either. For one, when I activate it, it doesn't show up on OBS, so I think it's one of those things that's proprietary for FaceTime. And also, it just does not work. I mean, a window pops up that says, you know, top-down view, but it's not capturing what it looked like during the developer keynote, where you can see the desk view and it's all laid out and everything. It doesn't look right. It's just all blurry and it doesn't capture the right thing. So that feature just flat out doesn't work, and I have no way of showing you that, unfortunately. But pretty much every other feature seems to work great. So there's a Studio Light, which I can activate for you now. I'll just turn it on, and sorry, audio listeners, I know you're out there. Basically, it highlights the subject and is able to detect me as the subject pretty well, and darkens the background, which I think looks quite a bit cinematic. I think I might leave it on in the future. It's nice that you can adjust the lighting settings without having to actually move lights around and that kind of stuff. Yeah, maybe the top-down desk view is Apple Silicon only. I don't know. I am using this on a 4.5-year-old computer, so that could be part of the problem. You can use portrait mode at the same time, so I'll activate portrait. And, okay, never mind. It doesn't want to turn on. Maybe not with Studio Light. Before it was working. Let me try it without. Huh. Yeah, it's just not doing portrait today. Well, I guess that's why it's in beta. That's another bug for you. But I'm clicking the portrait option and it's doing nothing. That's funny. Normally it works. But thank God they're still working out the kinks. But yeah, thank God I can now activate Center Stage, which instantly switches to the ultra-wide lens on the iPhone. And that means that without having to buy an additional studio display or without having to use an iPad, I can just activate Center Stage and the camera follows me around, which is pretty dang cool. Even if I go down like this, it'll track with me and follow along. You can catch the top of the MacBook display lid. It even sees that, which is pretty funny. So I'm very happy because every time I've ever used Center Stage, it's been on an Apple product that I was testing or reviewing. It's never been on something I kept. You know, I pretty much always had to sell it or return it whenever I tried out Center Stage on an iPad or on a studio display. I was like, you know, I like the capabilities of the Center Stage, but I'm not willing to pay $2,000 for it. I'm not willing to upgrade my whole iPad just for Center Stage. But the fact that I can just activate this now on basically any iPhone, I think I could be wrong, but I don't know about you guys if you have any memory of it, but Center Stage looks better on the iPhone than the studio display, in my opinion. There was a lot of artifacts and a lot of noise whenever you did it on the studio display, and with this, not so much, which makes sense because on the iPhone it's a 4K sensor, whereas even though it's a 12 megapixel sensor on studio display, it's still capturing that from like a 1080p rescaled output. I don't know if that's making any kind of sense, but yeah, the sensor is smaller. The lens doesn't capture as much light, so you can absolutely tell there's like a decrease in quality when Center Stage goes on. But keep in mind, this is an alternative webcam. That's exactly what it is. It's a camera for the web. It's going to be compressed. It's going to be based on your internet performance anyway. And I can guarantee you this is still miles better than the webcam that's included on my MacBook or on my iMac. And because Center Stage requires an ultra-wide lens, it has to crop in on a sensor in order to work. Whereas when you turn off Center Stage, which I will... Sorry. See, it still does that sometimes. It makes this chime sound. And I don't know what the chime sound is, but it froze for a minute there. I'm hoping... Okay, the stream doesn't appear to have crashed, which is good. But as soon as you turn off Center Stage, it defaults to the main sensor on the iPhone 13, which is by far the best sensor. So I can just turn it off, and boom, you get a lot more of that sharpness, that clarity. And this, obviously, if you don't want Center Stage to be turned on, is the best perspective you can get. So is it possible to use the selfie camera? I don't see an option to, no. It's not in Control Center if there is a way to do it. And yeah, you could try to flip around the iPhone. It won't do anything. It'll just keep capturing the rear facing. So yeah. Yeah, the chime means Tim Cook jacked into your stream. No, Tim! Leave us alone! It's just the sensor size that matters to let more light in, therefore more details. Yeah, I figured. There's pretty much always going to be a compromise when you switch to Center Stage in quality. But I still think it looks much, much better than the Center Stage sensor on the studio display. And this does for sure. Like when you turn off Center Stage on the studio display, it looks nowhere near as good as this main sensor does. The FPS is good. Yeah, we're just at 30, but that's good enough for YouTube. I can live stream at 60 FPS, but YouTube compression doesn't know how to handle it very well. Again, I've been stream testing all this past week. You know, I've been coughing a lot, so I haven't been able to live stream consistently as much as I would like. I'm hoping to get back into that now. But in the testing, whenever I streamed at 60 FPS, the live stream quality just did not look as good. YouTube didn't know how to handle that. Scratch it. Audio is popping a lot now. Uh-oh. Well, this is why it's a beta. Have you tried cinematic mode yet? Well, there's portrait, but not cinematic. I wonder if I can switch audio settings here. It's on iPhones. Okay. Switch it to, this is the iMac Pro mic, which seems to peak very easily. Where is it mounted? I just have a tripod literally on top of my old HomePod. I cannot show you desk view, no. As much as I would like to, it's not working, and there's not a way to route it into OBS. As far as I can tell, that you can only route that into... please fix the audio. I don't even know really how to. I switched it back to the iPhone mic. Some people say audio is fine. Yeah, I know the iMac Pro was super loud. I could tell because it was peaking really easy. Halami says it's not that loud to me. What's your ISP now? Still T-Mobile. I'm happy to report T-Mobile home internet has been fairly stable over the past couple weeks. So it's not always been stable, and sometimes it'll have multi-day outages, which is quite annoying and quite frustrating, and I'm very grateful that didn't happen during the event last week. But once again, thank you to T-Mobile for not freaking out on me. There's a huge difference between mics. Yeah, I figured. Uh, Desk View is just an app. You launch it by going to Control Center Video Effect. Yeah, I can launch it, but I'm telling you, it doesn't look right. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look like it does in the presentation. It's just a big blurry mess. And that could be a bug with the iMac Pro version of Ventura. And it might be fixed with Apple Silicon, but I can't test that for you right now. And it's an app, but I don't have this set up to capture my desktop display right now. And I don't really care to show you because it doesn't look good. I guarantee you would all look at it and go, "Oh, that doesn't look right. It's not working." That's spoiler alert. That's what it looks like. I could show it in a tweet or a video later when I talk about the feature working. But needless to say, no matter how I mount the iPhone, no matter where I position the iPhone, even if I put it exactly where it would be if I had that yet to be released Belkin iPhone mount, even if I did all that, it would not work. I couldn't get it at any angle that would look right. Does it work on Mac Mini or only for MacBooks? It should work with any Mac because I'm using it with an iMac right now, and it doesn't matter where the phone is mounted. Like I can pick it up and I can move this around. You can have a wave of yourself. And I can pick it up and walk across the room with it. It's impressive, honestly. I'm kind of scared too because I don't want the Wi-Fi to freak out since I'm live streaming and a lot of you people are watching. And I've had times where the Wi-Fi would crash on the computer and then it has to reconnect, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm not going to unplug it right now. But it says charging on hold. So far, I have not been able to get the iPhone to charge while also being a webcam. If I check on the iPhone, it says that due to heat reasons, it's just not charging the phone. So luckily you can check the iPhone battery percentage from your Mac because I can't easily reach around and look at the iPhone battery percentage. But if I go to Control Center, it says Android hold. And the longer I do this, the more that percent out. It should recover shortly. Okay. So I apologize for the lag. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. That is not T-Mobile. That is the Wi-Fi in the iMac. So this is why I'm hesitant to move stuff around and unplug things. What would happen if you have center stage and face the cam towards you? I'm not sure what you mean by that. The camera's always facing towards me, but center stage is just going to narrow in on whatever the face is. Wonder if it works better with Apple Silicon. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case, considering I didn't even really know if my iMac Pro is going to get macOS Ventura. I'm grateful it did, but I didn't know for sure if it was going to. I think my iMac is actually the oldest Mac that will run Ventura, considering I got it in 2017. How do I have it mounted? So I have a Manfro tripod that's designed to hold iPhones or any phone, and I put that tripod on top of my HomePod. So I don't have much use for my HomePod anymore, so it has literally just become my iPhone mount, which is quite hilarious. Twitch streamers always have trouble with phones overheating. I think that might be a potential problem of using the webcam for extended periods of time. I've never reached the point where the iPhone just overheated to the point it had to shut down and stop working. And I have done these Ventura stream tests for hours and hours behind the scenes. So I don't think it's that bad, but still, reason to be concerned. I imagine the 13 Pro Max might handle heat better than, say, like the iPhone 13 mini. Maybe if you were using the 13 mini, which is much smaller and all the components and stuff are all crushed together a lot more, maybe that's more prone to overheating. I'm not sure. And I mean, if you picked up the cam and walked around. Oh, I see. It would probably just do its best to track with me, but yeah, it would probably make you all sick to have center stage on and be moving the camera. Because that's another difference I've noticed when I started moving the phone around. Optical image stabilization is not working. I don't know why they turn that off, but when you're using the iPhone in webcam mode on your Mac, it's very, very shaky. It's wobbling a lot, and I can clearly tell that both digital and optical image stabilization is not really doing what it's supposed to. Um, macOS Ventura requires the T2 chip or Apple Silicon. Well, the T2 is technically Apple Silicon, which the iMac Pro has. I don't know if it's using that specifically, but um, I just appreciate Apple for listening because this was a big feature request. I've tried it several times for the record, right? Like some of you may be wondering, like, well, Drew, if you like the iPhone webcam so much, why didn't you just live stream through the YouTube app or through Streamlabs? You know, there's apps on your phone. I actually have, if you guys recall, there have been times where I've live streamed off my iPhone directly, but it doesn't work very well. The third party software is buggy. For one, YouTube gives you like no control over the stream bitrate and the resolution and the frame rate or your overlays or anything like that. If you stream directly from the YouTube app, it has to be 720p. It has to be 30 frames a second. There's no bitrate settings. There's no key interval settings. There's no rescaling settings. There's no overlay options. You can't do anything setting wise. You just are at the mercy of YouTube's bandwidth. Even if you have fiber optic gigabit internet, if you live stream from the YouTube app, it has to be 720p, which is just not very good. And optical image stabilization is turned off and everything. So you would think, okay, let me use a third-party app that's not YouTube. So I've tried to do live streams straight from the Streamlabs app, but that uses this whole relay thing where you have to stream to Streamlabs and then that streams to YouTube. So there's a lot more latency, and it doesn't handle smartphone internet very well. Like, I tried it. I thought, you know, if I have unlimited data, maybe I can use Starlink for all of my uploading because that doesn't need a super solid connection, and I'll do all of my live streaming straight off my phone because I have a lot of mobile data that I can access through Mint. But anytime there was some slight hiccup in bandwidth, even if I was on 5G, and 5G is very stable around here, the stream would crash and Streamlabs would not know how to retain it. Streamlabs would have audio problems where the audio and video would get out of sync really easily. And it just was not ironed out. It did not work very well. It was very compressed, and they put watermarks over the images. So I was like, I really want to stream from OBS, from the Mac, so that I can have those controls over the bit rate, and I can put these overlays when people, you know, super chat or subscribe, so I can show the animations and have control over the bit rate settings and quality settings. But I love my iPhone camera, and obviously the iPhone camera is very, very solid connection, and it's a lot easier to access with Ventura now than was using the Blackmagic cameras and the cam links, which were also spotty. Even the cam links wouldn't work very reliably, and you'd have to unplug them and plug them back in, and sometimes you'd get a Mac OS update and cam link wouldn't work anymore. So I was asking for a way to do exactly what I'm doing right now for years. And even the third-party apps that I would use were not very stable or reliable. Elgato made an app that let you convert your iPhone webcam into a webcam for your Mac, but it adds a watermark, and it was unstable. I tried it several times, and it would not keep the video and audio in sync, and it was not a reliable connection. And there was some third-party app that was free and didn't have watermarks, but you had to have the app open on your phone as you were doing it, and the settings with OBS would not sync up. It was not reliable. So the fact that I was able to just install this on day one with the dev beta, and it just works, and there's a couple hiccups here and there, but they're not deal breakers. You know, it's fairly stable. Like EpoCam, yeah, I tried EpoCam as well. How much battery this is consuming right now and how it compares to other existing options. I would bet that it uses less because when I go into Control Center, it's still at 91%, and they're able to keep the display off. So the fact that I can do this, thank you, Bart Jansen, for continuing your support as a channel member. The fact that I can keep using OBS and have access to these settings and have a first-party solution that does not require me to open the third-party app to download another program that's going to ask for a pay cut and put a watermark, and I have to pay to get rid of the watermark. The fact that it just works, and not everything Apple just works, but when it does, it's so incredibly satisfying and so relieving. So I know it'll get better over time, it'll get more stable, and it'll definitely be easier to use once I finally get Ventura on my MacBook Pro. But again, Ventura has been kind of buggy, so I'm hesitant to put it on my main editing Mac. I'm putting it on my backup. Like if the iMac Pro crashes and burns because of some dev beta, I'm okay. That's not going to impact my livelihood. I'm mostly just using the iMac Pro as a TV right now. I put Discord on there and I have YouTube videos playing on there when I'm working, but I still do all of my video editing and most of my live streaming straight off the MacBook Pro. It works on Zoom app. Yeah, it works on any third-party app. It treats the iPhone just like any external webcam or mic. That's why I'm able to do this. However, Desk View is an app that launches when you activate it, and it doesn't appear to show up. There's no way for me to show it in OBS other than to just capture my desktop display, which is kind of clunky. This is far better since it's first party and doesn't require a bunch of stuff being open. Yeah, I imagine this is going to be the most power efficient way to use your iPhone as a webcam, because if it works like Craig does, yeah, the display is off. So the iPhone's not even on, really. I mean, the camera is being used, but the display is off, which I imagine preserves the battery life. MC Rich 23, thank you for the super chat. He says, what do you use for your overlays? So it is a Streamlabs website. Luckily, you don't have to have the watermark to do those overlays. But yeah, I use Streamlabs. Yeah, we used Center Stage earlier. I can use it again for those who just joined. I'll go whop, and it switches to the ultra wide. So obviously there's some loss in quality there, but it do work. I can run around. It should follow me best it can. I don't know if the mic changes at all during Center Stage. Probably not, but yeah, I've always wanted this feature, but I've always had to test it on temporary hardware that I was just reviewing and not keeping. So the fact that I have Center Stage now and I don't have to return or sell anything, oh my god, like it actually makes the studio display far less appealing to me now. Like the fact that I can just add Center Stage to basically any Mac that's from the past couple years, oh my god, that makes me so happy. Like, oh, it works so well too. The connection looks solid, and it moves around just wherever your face goes, even if it goes down here. You can see the MacBook display lid in the shot. Unfortunately, one option that might be kind of nice, I don't know why they would offer this, but I would like the option to use the ultra-wide lens without Center Stage turned on. Sadly, there's no way to do that. So you have to use the ultra-wide with Center Stage on, obviously. But if you don't want Center Stage, it has to switch to the main lens, which is not ultra-wide. So obviously, this quality looks really good. But I've done videos with the ultra-wide lens, and when you're taking advantage of the full sensor and you're not cropping in, doing that Center Stage mode, it looks pretty nice. Like it's not a bad sensor if you're capturing the entire thing. So I would like to switch to that, and there's currently no way to. You also can't switch to the telephoto lens. I don't know if any of you would want to, but if you wanted to access telephoto during your web meetings or during your Zoom calls and that kind of stuff, that would be nice, but there's no option. I cannot show you desktop view. I apologize. It's not set up for that. It doesn't treat it like any other video source, and it's also just not working. Like, doesn't matter how I mount the iPhone, it doesn't work. Can't show it. Now I can just get those two 32-inch monitors and save a ton of money. Yeah, I feel like now that this feature is a thing, I'm far less interested in onboard webcams, because I'm going to have my iPhone. Like, that's not going away. And we know iPhone cameras are always and forever going to be better than webcams they put in MacBooks or in iMacs or studio displays, any of that. So I'm like, at this point, this may sound crazy to some of you, but if I had the option at checkout to not have a webcam on my MacBook, I'd probably do it now. Because I can't think of a situation where I'm not going to have access to my phone, but I will have access to my MacBook. Like, that's not really a common scenario for me. So it's like anytime I'm doing a FaceTime call or doing a live stream like this, I'm going to use my iPhone now as much as possible. And so I know a lot of you probably don't agree with me on that one, but I would definitely just say scrap the notch, get rid of the webcam on my MacBook now. I don't need it. I'll just use this every time. I don't know when I would go back to using the webcam and why. I guess there's situations where perhaps I would really want to. Mm, maybe I would really want to use my phone for something, but I'm also live streaming. But that's tempting me to want to just use a second iPhone. That's what, more than use the webcam, because if I switch to the webcam, it looks so much worse anyway. Um, I'm just using a tripod for my iPhone. How about using the iPhone as a mic for the Mac? Yeah, it's we're using the iPhone mic right now. I don't know how else to prove you to that, but no, I can't believe so many people are amazed by this. I every time I use the continuity camera, there's all these questions that are like, "How did you mount it? Where is it mounted?" It's like it's a tripod, dude. It's like good old like there's a million smartphone tripods out there. Of course, I have a tripod for my phone. I just put the phone on the tripod, but for some reason, Apple said that the iPhone has to be close to the Mac for this feature to work. It really doesn't. You can be like 10 feet away and the iPhone will still connect wirelessly. I'm honestly, I'm honestly tempted to unplug it just so I can show you guys how far away it works. But I'm worried about the Wi-Fi freaking out. Uh, have I watched the new season of No Man's Sky? No, I haven't. I've played No Man's Sky before. It wasn't terribly interesting to me. Uh, I cannot choose whether it is wireless or wired, but it is plugged in. I assume that when you plug it in, it just defaults to a wired connection, but I have no way of knowing for sure. Same thing with Sidecar. Um, Anytime I unplug it, it takes a second to reconnect, and then it tends to keep working. So I'm a little bit hesitant, but um, the best mount is an upside down coffee cup with a gap for the phone cut into it. I use it every day. The gap for the phone. I don't know. The Manfrotto tripod I bought was not very much. I think it was just a few $dozen, and it works very reliably. Oh, another weird thing about continuity camera I forgot to mention is that if you try to put the iPhone in portrait mode, it will not do it. It instantly crops in. It'll just punch in a bunch and keep it in landscape. So it's very much against the idea of you using this in vertical mode. I think I can show you that while keeping the port plugged in. So watch this. If I rotate, it'll just crop. And honestly, the quality is still pretty good, even though it's zoomed in a lot. But it won't let the video feed stay vertical, which is kind of funny. There's no way to turn that off, at least from what I can see. If I go to Control Center, yeah, no, there's no options in there to say like, hey, don't be vertical. So it keeps it in landscape, which is kind of funny. But yeah, if you're against portrait mode video, then I guess continuity camera is for you. Portrait mode is still not working today, which is weird because it worked earlier when I did a stream test. But thank you for the super chat, MC Rich. He said, if they put USB-C on iPhone, do you think that may sell both iPhone with Lightning and iPhone with USB-C, or just iPhone with USB-C? No, I don't see a scenario where they'd have an option for both. I mean, they may have older iPhones with Lightning. They do that with iPads. So it's like in a couple years or a year and a half, I guess, they could be like, the new iPhone 15 now with USB-C, but technically you can also buy the iPhone 14 from last year, and that still has Lightning, and you can still buy the iPhone 13 or the iPhone SE, and those have Lightning, but I don't think they'll have an iPhone 15 with USB-C or Lightning. I've never seen them offer that before, and it's far more complicated manufacturing-wise to make a bunch of different iPhones with different ports depending on the region. They don't do that with MacBooks. They don't do that with iPads, and I definitely iPhone they build more of than anything. So yeah, that would just complicate manufacturing. Does OBS see it as an audio and video source? Correct. Yeah, you can go in and add a video capture device in OBS, and it will show up. There's FaceTime camera, and then there's iPhone camera. It'll just say, and for me, it says Andrew's iPhone camera, and you just select that, and boom, Same thing with the microphone. That's what I have selected right now is Andrew's iPhone microphone. Let's see. Portrait orientation video doesn't happen too much. Not really, but I could see a use case where you'd want it. Like, I have a very specific use case. I'm sure it's not very common, but we record the Tech and EV podcasts with OBS. And a lot of the time, if there's 3 people on the show, you want to film in portrait so that you get a wider field of view of the subject, and it's up and down, so you have room on the sides to add other people that could also be filming in portrait. So the fact that this doesn't support portrait makes it kind of hard, because it means I have to crop in on the image, and you're basically forced to zoom in more. Yeah, TikTok is all in portrait mode. I don't know that many people that would be using continuity camera for TikTok, because you'd be recording the video directly to the Mac. Maybe if you post TikToks that have a lot of video edits in them, you would want to record directly to your Mac and then edit it in Final Cut for some reason. I feel like most TikToks are filmed and posted directly off the phone, so you wouldn't need to use your Mac for much. And yes, continuity camera automatically works. You just go to Control Center, go to Video Effects, and hit Center Stage, and boom, it just starts following you around, just like Center Stage would on an iPad. That's as far as the FOV is, I guess. Or, no, it goes a little further. Maybe it just doesn't want to track. It is slightly narrower than Center Stage on iPads and studio displays. Center Stage dedicated webcams are typically 122 degrees, and I believe the ultra-wide on the iPhone is 120 degrees. So it's very close, but it's close to the same width as a typical Center Stage camera, which is much better than most webcams can do, that's for sure, and definitely much better than the MacBook webcam, which has no Center Stage at all. Yeah, the quality drops with Center Stage, but I think it's because you guys have gotten used to the main lens now. If it was not the main lens, it would not look this good. Studio display webcam definitely does not look this good. MacBook display webcam does not look this good. The Center Stage option basically looks about the same quality as all the other webcams, because you're cropped, you're zooming in. Excuse me. Do you think we'll get a refresh this year on the iPhone design, or will we get the notch again? Every year they say redesign, and every year it's the notch. I think if you follow the right people, you'd know that no, they don't say redesign every year. If you're following people that say redesign every year, they're probably not very reliable. Quo is probably the most reliable when it comes to iPhone reports, and he did not say redesign, unless you're just talking about notch versus eye hole, and that counts as a redesign. I don't really count that as a redesign, but yeah, most of the display supply chains right now are looking like the 14 Pro. Sorry, I still have some coughs. There's less and less every day, but they're still there. Essentially, the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max will have the eye hole, which is a hole at the top of the phone in the shape of a lowercase letter I, instead of a notch. And I personally don't think it looks as good. I'm not a fan of the eye hole. I think that it cuts in on content more obnoxiously, and it doesn't really give you more useful screen space. I would rather they keep the notch. I was already not really in love with the iPhone 13 notch over the 12. I get that it's narrower, but it does cut in deeper, which matters more to me. If you go back and watch my review of the iPhone 13 Pro Max, I was basically like, I don't care. Like, I had a big, fat, wide notch on the iPhone 12 mini, and I did not notice it. I did not care. And then I switched to the iPhone 13 Pro Max with a big old display and a smaller notch, and I didn't notice. It did not look very different to me. So I was already not really on board with making the notch taller, and the eye hole cuts in even further than the notch I currently have does. So, I mean, it's not a deal breaker. It's not the reason I'm not getting the iPhone 14. It's not like if I was in the market and I really wanted to buy an iPhone 14, the eye hole would prevent me from doing so. But I would describe it as a side grade at best. I don't consider it better than the old design. I would not upgrade for that. I would not look at that as a perk of the iPhone 14. I would just say it looks a little different. I think the goal is for it to look newer. So because it looks different and because it looks newer, therefore it has the illusion of it coming across as better or more futuristic. I've tried phones with hole cutouts that don't have the whole pill shape and the circle. Like I tried the Galaxy S20 and the Z Flip and S20 Ultra and the OnePlus 8. And those all have single hole cutouts, which by Apple's logic would be better. And I tried even the OnePlus 7 Pro, which didn't have any camera hole. Didn't have a notch, didn't have a hole punch. It just had a pop-up camera. And I think it's an overrated design characteristic. I think people care way too much about the camera cutouts in phones than that really makes an impact on. I don't think it changes the usability of the phone. I think you get used to it within a couple seconds. It's definitely not a reason to upgrade, in my opinion. But in case you're wondering what they're thinking this year, the Pro iPhones will have technically not a notch, but I would say the next worst thing. It's like, I guess they got rid of the notch, but in like the most controversial way possible. I would say it's not objectively better than the notch, and it arguably is more intrusive than the notch was. So I'm not planning on upgrading this year, even though continuity camera is great. I will admit that this feature now, the fact that I'm going to be using my iPhone camera for many, many hours more than I did before, probably like close to 10 times as much as before. You know, like the iPhone camera is great, and I love having a very capable camera with me, but I'm not going to lie. I can look at my camera roll and tell you that I take pictures and videos maybe 2 or 3 a day on average. I mean, obviously it depends on the day. If it's a busy work day, I'm not taking very many pictures or videos. If I'm on a trip or I'm at a graduation or a wedding or a party, you know, depending on where I am, I may take 30, 40, I may take 100 pictures and videos, depending on what's going on that day. But it's safe to say, you know, I don't go to parties, graduations, or weddings all the time. Maybe 3 or 4 times a year, or if I go on a vacation, which I will be taking in a couple of weeks. I'm working on the vacation, though, so it's more of like I'm going on a trip, not necessarily taking a time off of YouTube. But, you know, if I'm somewhere I'm not normally at, I'll take a lot of pictures and videos. But now, the fact that the iPhone camera is going to become a tool for my live streams and my work, that kind of makes me more interested in how much better the iPhone camera can be, you know, but because before I was just taking pictures of food or of trips or of family or of friends with my iPhone a couple of times a day, maybe. But now if I'm using my iPhone camera hours and hours a week for work, then how good they can get the iPhone camera does impact my livelihood quite a bit more than it used to. So in that regard, I would say that this feature has tempted me to want to upgrade my iPhone more frequently, you know, because beforehand I was like, yeah, 13 Pro camera is great. Honestly, I did not upgrade to the 13 Pro Max for the camera. It was all because of the display. I was very happy with the 12 mini camera. And if there was no 120 hertz on any iPhone 13, I absolutely would have kept the 12 mini. I was happy with the battery life. I loved the screen size, and I loved the camera, and everything else was great. I just upgraded for the display because I'm a diehard sucker for 120 hertz, and I want that on every possible device I can get it on. And that's why I got the 13 Pro Max, not for the camera. But if they start rolling out features where it's like, okay, this new iPhone can be used as continuity camera at 4K or at 60 FPS, that would tempt me. That would kind of push me to want to upgrade. I'm not saying it guaranteed would, but that's the most tempting feature that would make me want to upgrade, because I know it would be something I would utilize every single day, and it would benefit my job and my work. But I don't think there's much of a chance of that happening, because continuity camera mostly is being pitched as a webcam alternative. You know, Apple doesn't even want to talk about there being a wired option. They just want to push it for Yeah, you can use it wirelessly, and it's great for FaceTime, and it's great for Zoom meetings. And 4K at 60 is not going to be super helpful for FaceTime calls or Zoom meetings. Even though you can technically do it on an iPhone, I don't even know if FaceTime supports it, just for bandwidth reasons. And it's a very niche thing for them to add that I don't think very many people would utilize. So yeah, I don't see myself. If it is bad, you go back. I know it's bugging out. This was the lag I was talking about. It's at the perfect time. Excuse me. Yeah, so this still happens with macOS Ventura Beta, where Wi-Fi freaks out and it disconnects, and there's nothing I can do. It's not T-Mobile, no, and it's definitely not Starlink. So people say audio is really bad, and that's how the sound is strained. Okay, I can try to jump back to my iMac microphone, which is too loud, so I'll lower it. Test, test, how about now? Okay, now the microphone is back to the iMac Pro. I hope Apple removes the charging port soon. Want to see the Android fans cry about it after a year and buy it. It's not looking likely. After Apple started adding ports back to the MacBook Pro and now the MacBook Air, they're even adding MagSafe back. Not a high likelihood of them going portless anytime soon, in my view. Switch to an Android device to the audio? No. I don't. If you think the iMac Pro is an Android device, you're more confused than I think. But yeah, the European Union did pass the law now, so it's sounding very, very official, even though it's not technically confirmed. It's looking very, very likely that the iPhone 15 is going to have to switch to Type C. Um, they have time. They don't have to adopt it with the iPhone 14, but yeah, the iPod mic was better than that. Oh my god, we should do a live stream with the iPod Nano again. Yes, Randy's in the chat. Recording in 4K at 60 and then encoding 1K at 30 for webcam output is still much higher quality than a native 1K at 60. True, but they're probably already doing that now. That's what you're using a 4K sensor, and then they're rescaling and outputting that to 1080. I do notice the video feed looking a bit more laggy now. Like when I move my hand, I can see it get a little choppy. Which this is what it did in my live stream tests, which is why I was unsure about going straight to. That's why I was unsure about going straight to continuity camera for everything. I know earlier people were asking if I would switch to using center stage for the members only streams. The only problem is if I do that, I can't show the display when I'm video editing because I'm not video editing off the iMac Pro, but in order to use continuity camera, I have to use the iMac Pro for now because I don't want to put Ventura Beta on my MacBook just because I use my MacBook for work and I need it to work reliably. And I've had issues with putting dev betas on my work machine and then I can't export videos. And that throws quite a wrench in my plans. You cannot, Chris Norton was asking earlier, you cannot easily, at least, there's some complex way you probably could do it, but it involves wiping the whole drive. You cannot easily downgrade if you don't like the beta, go back to the old version of macOS. At least in my experience, it doesn't work that well. Yeah, I see the video lagging just a little bit. I notice it too. It's confirmed, I think, but till 2026, so Apple has time. No, I didn't see that. I saw it say late 2024. Or I don't even know if it was late. I just remember the year being 2024, and you would want to release your products ahead of that deadline. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to sell them, or they'd be a lot less popular after that point on. So I'm pretty convinced that the iPhone 15 will have Type-C. But again, I charge my iPhone pretty much exclusively via MagSafe. Only reason I'm using the Lightning port right now is for hopefully that making this video feed more stable. But unfortunately, it still freaks out after I'm live streaming for 50 minutes or so, and it looks a little laggy. So since it's kind of laggy anyway, I'm just going to unplug Lightning and see what happens. So I apologize if the stream crashes when I do this, but I want to show you guys how it works. People are saying maybe the iPhone is throttling. If I feel it, it's not. I mean, it's warm. It's definitely not cold, but I felt it much hotter in the past. That would suck if the lag over time is what made it do that. But okay, I'm going to unplug it now and see what happens. Here it goes. Okay, I'm convinced it's probably already casting over Wi-Fi because I unplugged it and it didn't change at all. So I personally don't think continuity camera was using the wired connection anyway, even though there's no way to control that. So I'm going to pick it up here. Whoa! That's trippy. You guys can all see the non-cancerous bump on my neck that people love asking me about. Okay. So as you can tell, even though I have this in a tripod, it's very shaky. So digital or optical image stabilization is not working or not on. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I can stand up and walk around like this, and the video feed is basically, I mean, it's a little choppy, but it works. You know, it's capturing everything. I'm sure because I'm using the iMac Pro microphone, it sounds a bit quieter when I'm over here, but like I could get out and walk to the living room and it would probably keep the connection working. But it's so weird that it works as you're like picking it up and moving it around. Like, there's no connection. Yay. That's so weird, but amazing at the same time. Not bad. For a built-in first-party wireless camera, it works pretty dang well. To the point that I plan on using this for the Tailosive food live streams. I could see myself picking up the camera and showing what we're cooking and that kind of stuff. Maybe for walking is better on the wide camera. Probably, but you can't switch it to just the wide camera. All you can do is turn on center stage, unfortunately. I guess someone was asking earlier what would happen if I did center stage and walked around. Probably just feels trippy. Yeah, it's a little laggy, but I mean, this is doing its best to track. Yeah, if I move the phone around, it just kind of locks in on my face. But yeah, that's center stage at least when the camera's moving around. The battery probably drains a little faster. So I can turn this off now. How about portrait mode? You want to work? Nope. Portrait mode just doesn't feel like working today, which is funny. It's worked every other time I've done a stream test. And studio light still works. Looks pretty nice. It disconnected when I unplugged the lightning cable. For me, I noticed no change in the bitrate or the quality when I unplugged it, so I'm convinced that even when you plug it in, it might still default to the wireless depending on how it feels. Center stage looks like the MacBook cameras. That makes sense because you're cropping in on a larger sensor, so you're not preserving as much quality. That could be making the phone too warm if it is. It's really not that hot in here, but I guess the phone itself, it really doesn't feel that hot. I have a hard time believing it's the phone overheating. Much better without center stage, but that's understandable. Yeah, well, it's using the ultra wide lens and cropping in versus using a larger sensor and not cropping. So obviously, yeah, that's going to impact the quality. I can't show you desk view. That seems to be more of a, I mean, it's an app, but it seems to want to integrate more into FaceTime. I can't really integrate it into OBS very much. It appears that The Verge said you can use continuity camera wired if it seems to be a problem with bandwidth. I know that they say you can, but they give you no option. I mean, you can plug it in, but that doesn't really mean it's using wired. You just have to take the operating system's word for it. So I'll plug it back in right now and see if it changes anything. There's no hold up and there's still a bit of lag, and yeah, like to me there's no way of really knowing if it's using wired or wireless. There's no option. Maybe the 14 Pro will have improved ultrawide, so that would be the same quality with the normal lens. The sensor would have to be pretty dang big. Anytime you digital zoom in on a sensor, or, you know, the problem is you're trying to cover a much wider field of view, but the size of the lens is the same as the main sensor. So when you're capturing more light, but the size of the lens is the same, there's always going to be some distortion and some compression when you do that. So I mean, they could make it better with a larger sensor, but I don't see it ever beating or matching the quality of the main lens. Turn off Wi-Fi on the iPhone to make it go wired. I don't think I can access the iPhone settings without turning off this webcam. So if I do that, it might freeze and crash the stream. Maybe the 14 Pro ultrawide sensor will be the same sensor the main. That's not my point. Like even if the megapixel sensor was the same, you're capturing a wider field of view, which means more light within the same space, so that the quality just wouldn't be there. If you go from wireless to plugged in, it won't switch while in use because it has to grant permission for USB connection to the Mac. I've tested it. Well, at the beginning of this live stream, it was plugged in, and I activated it plugged in, and then it still crashed and freaked out and had to reconnect. And I'm pretty confident when it reconnected, it went over Wi-Fi. So, can you use Control Center from Continuity Camera? You could, but I don't think you can shut off Wi-Fi that way. I don't even know if you can, actually. Let me try. Yeah, the screen just says connected. I could turn off Wi-Fi, but that's not really, that's just disconnecting it. It's not turning it all the way off. Yeah, I won't. When the passcode shows up, it freezes. So I can't turn off Wi-Fi from Control Center. You can just disconnect from the network, but that's not the same thing. I think it will require Wi-Fi regardless. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if that's how it works, just like Sidecar does. I think it just went to wired because there's a noticeably longer lag on a frame there. Now it looks marginally better. Yeah, it may have switched over. I don't see the lag as much. It's just weird. It's weird that there's no way to like control that. If I had the option, I would say just do wired. Like, don't try to do anything wirelessly because that always looks laggy when you try it. This is, I think, currently the iMac Pro microphone, but I can switch it back to the iPhone mic. Okay, now it's on iPhone mic again. I don't know if it, every other time people have said the audio gets all messy. Whenever there's a disconnect and a reconnect, people are like, the iPhone mic sounds bad, so I don't know if it works. How much do you think the little adapter will cost for continuity camera? Probably something absurd. They'll probably charge like $50 for it or something. Airplane mode and then tapping the Wi-Fi will turn off Wi-Fi, like if you toggled it off in settings. Oh, I see what you're saying. That could break everything. Maybe I'll try that near the end of the live stream. Kind of quieter, sounds good though. Yeah, the iMac Pro mic for some reason was way louder, so I turned down the volume in OBS, but I turned it back up for the iPhone. Sounds lower with iPhone. Ever since Universal Control, Sidecar has been useless for me. I have to agree. The iPad has just gotten progressively more and more useless as time has gone on. I have stopped making video thumbnails with the iPad after iOS 16 came out. Once I started being able to lift subjects straight out of pictures, I was like, that was pretty much everything I used my iPad for, was just masking out pictures and subjects. And now I don't need to do that thanks to iOS 16. So I've used the MacBook mic once the final version comes out. That's the plan. When I did the podcasts this last week, I recorded off of the MacBook and I recorded off of continuity camera. And I thought that the audio from the MacBook still sounded better. So once Ventura is out for the public, I will probably still use the onboard mics of the MacBook and then the video feed from the iPhone. And hopefully it doesn't overheat. iPhone and Mac became more useful in comparison. But that does impact the usefulness of something. Something can become useless by something else becoming more useful. That's the thing. Uh, a dedicated, what's it called? A point and shoot camera was very useful, but then as smartphone cameras got better and better, those dedicated cameras, even though they're technically the same, they're still point and shoots and they still have digital zoom and you can still take okay pictures on them, but they're basically not as good as the cameras on our phones, so that made that point and shoot camera kind of useless, even though it stayed the same. Powerful chips, but iPadOS is half baked. Yeah, I've watched a lot of videos and a lot of demos of Stage Manager. Oh, I've tried Stage Manager for the record. I used it a couple times on my iMac Pro, and I really don't find it very helpful. I think it's a slightly tweaked version of multitasking. I don't really understand people saying that it enables the iPad to do so much more now. I'm like, what can it do now that it couldn't do before? I don't understand. It's just a slightly tweaked version of multitasking to me. Like before, you could do split screen multitasking, and then to switch apps, you would just swipe up and tap the recently viewed apps on the dock, and now you just don't have to swipe up. You just tap the apps on the side instead of swiping up and then tapping. Okay, it saves one step, but it's still the same apps at the end of the day. You're still running iPad apps. There's not really any new apps or new functionality, in my view, other than the multitasking looks a little different than what it used to. I'm looking forward to this feature to use it with my Mac Mini. Yeah, I guess the Mac Mini fans will be very happy because they don't have any webcam right now. So you can just convert any iPhone into your Mac Mini webcam. You could make the iPad amazing by making it act like a Mac Mini when you hook it up to a monitor and keyboard. True, that what Goki said, it's Alt-Tab but always on. That's what Alt-Tab was. You could just hold Alt and hit Tab and you could switch between apps like that really quickly. Now you just always have that on, but with the iPad displays being so small, it's not a very good use of space because there's all this padding around all the apps now, and you have to have that left column of the screen available. Again, I tried it on my iMac Pro, and that's with a 27-inch display, and I found it a waste of space. So I'm sure it would feel wasteful on an 11-inch display. So I don't see what feature it enables or what use case it's like, oh, I couldn't do blank before, but now that Stage Manager is there, now the iPad can replace, like, what? Isn't that what Command Tab does on the Mac as well? Pretty much. But I mean, we're not complaining about multitasking on the Mac. They just kind of added this new weird multitasking mode on the Mac that I don't think a lot of people will use, and then also happen to add it on the iPad at the same time so they could say, see, it's like a Mac now. And I'm like, but no one's going to use that. Stage Manager would be extra helpful on iPad Mini. Yeah, it's not even on iPad Mini. That's the funny thing. I like the ability to use an external monitor as a secondary display. I guess it has that going for it, but I mean, like, you could kind of do that before. Although before it was mirroring. It wasn't that you couldn't use an external monitor. It was just it mirrored the screen on the iPad, and now it's technically an additional display. But again, that's just another view of multitasking. Now you can have one or two apps running on the iPad and then have another 2 or 3 apps running on the external display. But again, if you go back and watch most of the complaints about the iPad Pro not being capable enough, people were not bringing up the multitasking. I mean, that was part of it, but that was not the highest on the list. I don't think my biggest complaint with the iPad was that I can't run 5 apps at the same time. You know, it was more like there's not apps that really take advantage of the hardware here. It does feel wasteful on the 11-inch iPad Pro. The more space zoom helps, but it's still crammed. Yeah, I have to agree. iPadOS 16 still doesn't take advantage of the A12Z chip. No, it actually software locks out features. So I saw a lot of sad comments about that. I was sad to see. There was a lot of people who spent over $1,000 on the A12Z iPad Pros, and they're already not getting most of the iPadOS features. I came here hoping to see your keyboard, but forgot that's an iOS 16 feature. No, it's part of the desk view thing, but it's not working, and I don't really have a good way to show you. You think the virtual memory feature in iPadOS 16 will let Procreate have unlimited layers? Probably not unlimited, but more than before. But again, I didn't think that the RAM usage was the problem either. The main problem I have with the iPad is that it doesn't know what its general purpose is. It has niche purposes, but it doesn't have a purpose that makes it a must-have for everyone. Well, it's hard to find any device that's a must-have for everyone, but iPhone is definitely the closest. And the Mac basically covers everything but gaming. And there's still a lot of people that fight on that hill saying, we got to get the Mac good at gaming. The Mac has to get good at gaming. And it's like, I think it's a developer problem. I don't think it's an Apple problem. I didn't spend close to $1,000 on the A12Z iPad Pro, but still robbery for people who did. I'd be very ticked off. I mean, I don't feel that ripped off because I did spend $1,000 on my iPad, but that was in 2018. So just now in 2022, like 4 years later, I'm starting to find out that there's pretty massive iPadOS features that they're not giving to my iPad. So I don't feel that ripped off, but there was a lot of people buying iPad Pros for over $1,000 in like late 2020 and early 2021 that are not getting the latest features. I think taking notes, yeah, is pretty much iPad's best use case. Is just they're good at note taking, but what's most frustrating for me is that there's not another piece of Apple hardware that I think's as limited by the software. Like, okay, they don't put Final Cut or external monitor support on the Apple Watch, but no one's asking for that, right? Because it's a watch. There's no ports, and it's like watchOS 9 is not that interesting, or there's not that many updates with watchOS 9. I have the beta, by the way. This is watchOS 9 I'm running. I barely noticed that I was running it after I installed it. There's very few changes, but you don't see me complaining about it because I think that watchOS takes advantage of the hardware. Like everything really that you care for a smartwatch to do, watchOS 9 covers. Whereas there's so much more that the iPad hardware can do, but they just don't let it because it's an iPad, and iPads aren't supposed to do that. That's what's probably the most frustrating part for me. Like, I've argued with a lot of people about it, and usually their logic is, that's not what iPads are for. iPads aren't supposed to do that. It's like, you could apply that faulty logic to so many things in the past that end up not being the case. Like, to me, the analogy I was imagining this morning was like if the iPhone came out, but it didn't have a music app. Or, originally it was called the iPod app. On the original iPhone, it was like, you can open the iPod app and store all your music and listen to, your podcasts and your favorite albums and your favorite artists. You can listen right off the app. Imagine if they came out with the iPhone, but you couldn't put music on it. Because they were like, no, if you want music, you use an iPod. iPods are for music and podcasts. The iPhone is for making calls and taking pictures and videos. That's what an iPhone's for. You'd be like, well, yeah, but I don't want to carry around an iPod and a phone. Like, wouldn't it make more sense to just put the music and, you can add an app to the iPhone that lets it play music and podcasts, and they'd be like, we could, but that's not what the iPhone's for. That's what an iPod is for. Don't ask for the iPhone to become an iPod. That's the closest analogy I can describe to people telling me that the iPad is not supposed to have pro apps, or it's not supposed to run Mac OS, or frankly, it's not allowed to do things like this. Like, again, it's not one or two things that I want the iPad to be capable of. It's not like they just add Final Cut and I'd be happy. It's like a million little things. It's like terminal commands, it's Xcode, it's Logic, it's Final Cut, but it's also external monitor support, external microphone settings, audio MIDI application, like more customization on the system preferences side of things, enhanced file management system that can do everything the Mac. Like, in my view, if you're putting the M1 chip in MacBooks and you're putting the M1 chip in iPads, iPads have batteries, iPads have displays, iPads can connect keyboard and mice to them. There's no excuse then for any feature that a MacBook Air can do, any software related thing that MacBook can do, then the iPad should be capable of it. And the only reason there's so many things that it can't is because of software, is because of the fundamental viewpoint of people saying, oh, the iPad's not supposed to do that because it's an iPad. An iPad is supposed to be, I don't know. They write it off as it's user friendly. It has to be approachable and accessible to everyday people, which is another way of saying it can't have options. It can't have more features and stuff. It's like, no, that's not a good argument to me. That doesn't make sense. So I don't follow that mindset. If someone spent, $2,000 on a spec'd out M1 iPad Pro and they got it with the keyboard case and it has a trackpad and it has the M1 chip and it has a mini LED 120 hertz panel and tons of storage, tons of RAM. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. New iOS buggy. I want to speak to the stage manager. Yeah, it's a dev beta. That basically guarantees there will be bugs. I don't know why you're surprised by that, but Apple doesn't want to sell you a MacBook for $700. Well, they don't want to sell you Stage Manager for $700 either, because you got to buy an iPad and you got to buy a keyboard case to get it to work. So that's a $900 purchase right there. I'm not against the concept of locking software features to higher end iPads. If you want Pro apps or if you want dual boot macOS to only be on the 13-inch iPad, that's fine by me. I'm not against the idea of software locking. It's just do it on devices that only are capable of it. Whoa. I don't know why that animation was so laggy, but holy crap, Jane. Thank you for the super chat. That was awfully kind of you. Very generous. Love your opinions and videos. They really help. Thanks. Well, I appreciate the super chat. As long as you guys are watching, I'll keep doing this stuff. But yeah, like I'm not against the concept of them software locking things to M1 iPads. I just don't think Stage Manager is worthy of software locking. That is not a complicated feature. If you want to say that for Final Cut to work or for macOS to load, it needs to be on silicon that is in a Mac. Therefore, the only way to do macOS is if you have a keyboard and trackpad set up, because we don't want to redesign macOS for touch, obviously. So you'd say if you have a keyboard and trackpad and an iPad with an M1 chip, then you'll do macOS. It's not cheaper than a MacBook. It would have worse battery life than a MacBook. It would not have a headphone jack, and it would not come with a keyboard or trackpad. The display wouldn't be as big. The storage wouldn't be as much. Or you could say if we do offer dual booting, it requires 16 gigs of RAM. They could easily just say that. They could easily just say, if you want iPadOS and macOS on the same device, it requires a lot of storage and it requires a lot of RAM. So dual boot requires a 512 gig minimum storage amount. So you can software lock it to the higher end iPads. This does not cannibalize anything. It's like them saying, Apple doesn't want you to buy an iPhone that replaces your iPod. They want you to buy an iPhone and an iPod. That's why they won't put music on the iPhone. Like that's what that argument sounds like to me. It'd be better for you to buy an iPad and a Mac. It's like, I think people are choosing one or the other. I don't think that many people are. It's honestly in Apple's best interest to make an iPad that's capable of doing everything a Mac can, because that would cost more than someone buying a Mac and a cheap iPad, or just not buying a new iPad at all. They'll buy an iPad once and then not upgrade it for years. macOS can run absolutely fine on 8 gigs. I'm sure it can, but if they're saying, because it's an iPad out of the box, it has to run iPadOS. There's no way you can remove iPadOS, then it needs to have additional RAM so you can instantly switch back and forth to make that easy. Like, I can understand them software locking features. I just don't believe Stage Manager justifies a software lock, because it's not that complicated a feature, in my opinion. You're running like a couple of apps at the same time. You could easily add Stage Manager to an A12X or to an A12Z iPad Pro, because I've seen how many apps you can run at the same time with a Mac that has 4 gigs of RAM. It's not that complicated. It should have been obvious from the beginning that M1 iPads would get exclusive features. Just admit that you were dumb for recommending the cheap iPad. I will never admit I was dumb for telling people to save money. In fact, I'm very, very grateful, C, that I did not tell people to buy an M1 iPad because I don't find Stage Manager a useful feature. And I wouldn't recommend people, even with Stage Manager being the thing, I would not recommend anybody on earth to buy an M1 iPad. I cannot think of a single use case or a single example where I think that investment is worth it. So no, sorry, I'm not going to admit that. But I was not suggesting ever that they not give software exclusive to the M1. If you follow my channel at all, you would know I very clearly and objectively said they should come up with software exclusives. There should be things they lock to just the M1 iPads. But I didn't say slightly tweaked multitasking. That's not what I was saying. I was saying pro apps or dual boot Mac OS. That's what M1 iPads should have. I would not be complaining if they said only M1 iPads could do that. I would understand. I would say, okay, they want to optimize Mac OS for the M series of chips. Got it. Understood. Unfortunately, no. I cannot switch to the telephoto camera. That's not an option. Karen says, when will Apple send you new stuff early for review? Probably never. There's only a certain number of people they want to send stuff to, and I didn't make the list. Likely because I'm too crazy, especially when I put crazy skits in the beginning of my videos where I show myself grabbing Tim Cook by the throat. Yeah, I don't think Apple likes that. I'm a loose cannon, and there's kind of a script that they want you to stick to when you sign those NDAs, and I'm not good with scripts. I don't stick to those, so I don't care. I've accepted it. It'd be nice to get stuff early, but I'm just not going to get it. I probably won't ever be on their nice list, but that's fine. I'd rather be honest and transparent with you guys than just turn into another channel that reads off a teleprompter and says exactly what the contract tells me I have to say. Thank you for the super chat. Terry, he says, I've been tough on you recently, but I appreciate what you do. I don't know why you've been tough on me or what you've been tough about for, but I appreciate the super chat, Terry. Thank you very much. Why are you mad that it gets exclusive features? I told you, because those exclusive features are not that complicated. And I was not advocating for slightly tweaked multitasking to be a software exclusive. But we should be upset that the useless features aren't available on the older devices. Make it make sense. Yeah, I'm saying Stage Manager is not a complex task. I'm very well aware of what it requires. It does not require 8 gigs of RAM for Stage Manager to work. Because I've seen Macs running 8 applications at the same time with 4 gigs of RAM. You could easily add that to 6 gigs of RAM iPads or 4 gig of RAM iPad Pros. It's not a complicated feature. If you want to restrict dual booting because that's more demanding of the silicon to have 2 operating systems and try to make it able to switch between the two, or saying that we just want to optimize Mac OS for devices with the M1 chip. We don't want to have to optimize Mac OS for the A12X or A12Z chip. I'd be like, okay, I understand. That's fair. It's not a justifiable software lock in my opinion. There are features that would be, but this isn't it. When they announced Apple Silicon to develop apps and the developer said that it ran smooth. The only reason I don't fall on that argument too often is because the Mac Mini Dev Kit, it lagged again for no reason. Yeah, still in beta. Yeah, the Mac Mini Dev Kit with the A12Z chip was modified to have 16 gigs of RAM. So it's not exactly the same as the A12Z chip they put in the iPad Pros, but Stage Manager is not that power intensive. I've used it and I know how it works. It's very, very similar to what iPads already are capable of doing. I got an A12X iPad for $350. That's a great deal. That's what I would still recommend to people. Absolutely. Like if someone, I don't think the list of iPad use cases is long, but it exists. It just hasn't changed for. People are saying audio issues. Okay. It lagged and freaked out, so the audio is bad. Hold on. I'll switch back to the iMac Pro microphone. So we may not be ready. Sorry, it's too loud. We may not be ready to switch completely to continuity camera just yet because of all this. We're back to iMac Pro mic. Um, I do admit that there is a use case for iPads, which is note taking and drawing. Stuff that you use the Apple Pencil for, that's pretty much what iPads are good for, that you can't get outside of that. But you do not need the M1 chip for that. To this day, even knowing what I know about iPad OS 16, if someone said, I need an iPad for note taking and for drawing and for school and that kind of stuff, I would still recommend them get a certified refurbished 2018 iPad Pro. I don't think you should spend another $500 or $1,000 just so that you can have Stage Manager, because I've used Stage Manager myself and I don't find it very useful. I don't think it enables you to do much more. You're not going to do the note taking and you're not going to do much drawing with an external monitor anyway. It took Apple 12 years to create a weather app for iPad, so dual boot switching display is way too dang hard for them to design. I think it would be the easiest way to add everything people want. If you go and watch the reviews of the M1 iPad Pros, any iPad Pro review from the past 3 years, pretty much what every reviewer says would be fixed by just adding Mac OS. They've done dual boot before. They've designed it, and they can build it into an Apple Silicon powered computer easily. It took them forever to add the weather app, but I'm just saying they add this one little feature and restrict it to some iPads. You can instantly justify $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 iPads instantly, because you could say, okay, it does everything a Mac can. Done. Everyone's asking, like, I want these pro applications that take advantage of the hardware. I want the revamped file management system. I want the terminal commands. I want the third-party app support. I want the external monitor scaling support. Stage Manager gives you pretend multitasking. It's fake. You're paying to have a device that will continue to get better every year? Clearly not. We've already proved that people who bought $1,000 iPads in 2020 are getting left out. So how do you know the M2 iPad Pro isn't going to get a bunch of features that the M1 iPad Pro isn't going to get? If anything, the fact that they've software locked a bunch of Pro features to the M1 iPads, that's more indication of why you shouldn't get the M1 iPad, because they'll probably software lock a bunch more crap to the M2 one. So no, it does not justify it to me. They clearly have shown that in order to get people to spend more money on their iPads, they're willing to software restrict features, which is not worth it. I still think for the best use case of an iPad, you'd be perfectly fine with a 2018 Pro. And I wouldn't recommend anybody upgrade for Stage Manager. It's not worth it. A12X, A12Z are still plenty fast chips for anything you can do on an iPad. I don't think there's really an app or a use case on those M1 iPads that can take advantage of the M1. Your argument is that is stupid. But your honor, his argument is stupid. Oh, very good point, Judge. I didn't think of that. I don't think that's a great counterpoint. How close are you to selling your iPad Pro, considering how little you use it nowadays? I don't think I could sell it for any reasonable amount, just because it's so old, and I tried to sell it a while back and I didn't get really any serious legitimate offers, so I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. I haven't used it all week. I don't know. I don't think I'd sell it. I'd only probably get like $200 out of it, and it's probably good as a travel media consumption device. Like, basically use it like a streaming machine. You just watch movies on it on flights and stuff. It's smaller and lighter than my laptop, so yeah. I got the Air 4 knowing there would be exclusive features with the Air 5, but I knew they would be useless. Turns out I was right. Yeah, exactly. Good point. Maybe give the iPad to Louise. Well, that's kind of already what's happened with her 10.5-inch iPad Pro. This is the 2017 iPad that is her iPad, but it does not get much use. It's sat on the desk here for the past couple of weeks. She does not use iPads very much. She's more comfortable on her phone. Um, let's see. Which iPad Pro do I have? Asks Retethered Tech. It's the 64 gig 2018 iPad Pro from 12.9 inch. It was great at the time. The hardware was cool. It just didn't grow. Like the hardware on the iPhones and the Macs just got so much better as time went on. And with this, it's not really. Um, People saying microphone is tripping again. Really? This is the iMac Pro mic. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. That was very nice of you. You seem to know a lot about how Apple sends stuff early for review and what those reviewers have to abide by. Where did you read this information? I don't. I've had conversations off the record with people that I'm not going to single out because they asked me not to say who they are. But uh, all I can say is, all I know that I'm comfortable saying is that it's not something you do. You don't do XYZ and then you get free stuff. Apple will contact you. If Apple's interested in sending you free stuff to review, you don't do anything. You don't submit an application. You don't follow something to a T. All I can say is try to shoot like everybody else does. It's honestly, you have to do things that I wouldn't be interested in doing. It seems like Apple likes to reach out to channels that film at very high quality with good color correction and good cinematography, and that are not very harsh on their products. They seem to like sending products to people that highlight why their products are so great and how much they love them and how much they like them. So essentially, if you're willing to turn your channel into just a nonstop Apple advertisement for a video, they'll send you stuff. Unless you're huge, if you have like over 10 million subscribers, you can say whatever you want because you're huge. But if you're small and up and coming, they're looking for someone that will basically do free advertising for them. So if you had someone like me come forward and say, I don't think the M1 iPad Pro is worth it, the M1 chip is overpowered and the performance within iPad OS doesn't justify this, then they're going to see that and say, hey, this guy doesn't recommend our product, so we're not going to send him our product because that's not in our best interest. So I'm perfectly happy with praising Apple products when I think they're great. Like there's probably a lot of videos on this channel that you guys would say feel like an Apple commercial. But there's also a lot of products where I say, don't buy this, buy last year's model, buy the certified refurbished model, or don't buy the iPhone SE3, buy the iPhone XR or iPhone 11 on Amazon renewed, and that's a way better deal or a way better product. Apple doesn't like that kind of thing. And I also don't subscribe to going all in on the most fancy lenses and cameras and equipment and making the most fancy B-roll possible because I feel like we already have 500 YouTube tech channels all doing the same thing. They're all trying their best to show the coolest possible angle of the same phone or the same laptop. And I'm like, okay, you can't compete with people that, some channels spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on camera setups. And there's only so many different angles and perspectives you can come up with B-roll. So I'm not going all out on B-roll. I'm just trying to be funny and entertaining and offer a unique perspective. And I feel like if I don't have honesty and I don't have transparency with you guys, then I have nothing. The best thing I can offer to you guys is my opinion because I'm an expert on that and no one else has my opinion. So I can tell you exactly what I think. You can disagree with it, but I'm not going to buy more clicks or more validity by trying to duplicate what other people are already doing. Let's see. If you are Unbox Therapy or Linus Tech Tips, they have a huge audiences and they still don't get review units from Apple. Well, that's very obvious why. They're clearly biased against Apple and they intentionally will say things about them that make them look bad, even if they're not true. So that doesn't surprise me at all. You can absolutely get on Apple's blacklist where they're like, okay, he's big, but we don't want to send stuff to him because he's hard on us. That kind of thing. I haven't seen the new Jurassic World, but I heard Tim Cook is in it. That made me want to watch it. Let's see. I just seen roast Apple a lot. She says Windows is better. What? Since when? Let's see. Love the video quality, but the mic is meh. Yeah, I'm using my iMac Pro microphone, so that's not the iPhone. If I switch back to the iPhone mic, it might freak out again. So when it's working, the iPhone mic is pretty good, but it's not working. It's not looking right now. The arguments are inconsistent with one another. When it's convenient, they should have included the features in the older iPads, but when it's also convenient, those features don't matter anyway. I don't know how else to explain to you that Stage Manager is not a technically complicated feature, so that I don't think it justifies software locking it. Okay, I don't know how analogies that I analogiate. What am I trying to say? That's a new fun word. I exaggerate in my analogies to prove a point. Okay, I'm not saying it's an exact apples to apples comparison, but I'm trying to give you a comparison so you understand what my viewpoint feels like. Okay, here's the best way I can explain it. Imagine if Apple launched the weather app on iPadOS, but you could only run it on M1 iPads. And they said that, sorry, the weather app is so power intensive and so complex that we can't put it on any iPads that don't rock the M1 chip. If they would have done that, all of you would have said, this is ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense. You can obviously run the weather app on iPhone silicon, which is not, it's the same kind of silicon that they're rocking in the iPad mini 6 or the budget iPad. They should be able to add the weather app to all iPads because it's not that technically impressive. It's just a basic app collecting weather data. You would be confused by that, and you would argue as to why that doesn't make sense, even if you were in favor of should an iPad with an M1 chip and with more performance have software features that enable it to do more Mac-like things. And you could say, sure, okay, the budget iPad with the A13 chip, yeah, that doesn't need to run Mac OS, or the iPad mini 6 is too small, there's no smart connector, that probably doesn't need to run Mac OS. You could understand that argument. But you've seen the weather app work on lower end silicon, so you wouldn't buy Apple's logic in the use case of saying that you need the M1 chip for the weather app to work. That's my equivalence. It's not that false of an equivalence to me because we know that features like Stage Manager work on Macs with far worse silicon. You don't need 8 gigs of RAM to run 4 applications at the same time. That's not how much RAM those apps use. Stage Manager is not that RAM intensive, and you could easily add it to other iPads. So I don't think it's a false equivalence. Stage Manager is not on iPad Pro, which is why this is a false equivalent. What? Yeah, it is. It's on all the M1 iPad Pros. I don't even follow your... If we can't even agree on facts, then this isn't going to work. Sorry, I don't watch that many tech channels, so I haven't seen Rene Ritchie's recent video where he tries to justify the software lock. Sorry, I haven't seen it, but I assume it's something similar to C. I think they rose the requirements of what Stage Manager is too high to justify software locking it off of others. Like, okay, maybe if you brought Stage Manager to an iPad with 4 gigs of RAM, it would only run 3 apps at once instead of 4. Okay, just don't let it run at full capacity then. Like, have a watered down Stage Manager. They could have easily done that. Stage Manager is not on iPhone. No, but you can have apps running in the background. Like, again, that argument doesn't work when we've shown Macs with less hardware running multiple apps at the same time. Those of us who wanted heavy apps on our M1 iPads were talking about Logic Pro, Final Cut Pro, maybe Xcode. Yeah, I just don't think there's any logic in why an M1 iPad shouldn't be able to do anything an M1 Mac can't do. M1 Mac can do. There's no logic to that. iBook G4s with less storage and RAM could run Expose, which was basically Stage Manager and the precursor to modern day mission control. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Okay, Connor Dunaway. Thank you for the super chat. He says, I sent one. I don't think you saw it. I apologize. I missed it. I do apologize. That was my bad. If I had a refund button, I would click it, Connor, but unfortunately, YouTube won't add that. He says, are you able to plug in external speakers and an external mic at the same time? Yes, there's no reason not to be able to. On Macs, yeah, that's the nice thing about Mac OS is there's a lot of control and there's a lot of options. Sorry, sometimes I get caught up in the chat and I miss some of the super chats. I know Rene Ritchie. I've seen his tweets. I know he essentially defends Apple leaving out certain things until they add those things, and then somehow he becomes more okay with it. But I just don't think the logic holds up, in my opinion. If it's like you're putting the same chip in an iPad and you're putting that exact same chip in a more expensive. Sorry, you're putting the same chip in a Mac as a more expensive iPad, but then saying the iPad can't do that because iPad. I just fundamentally disagree with the argument. Might have been an exclusive feature, but you expect me to take your opinion on it seriously? Why do you assume I haven't done due diligence? I've listened to the Craig interviews. I've heard their logic on it. I just don't think their logic makes sense. It absolutely. I have seen a Mac with less than 8 gigs of RAM run just as many apps at the same time as Stage Manager. There's no, just like what Scott said. They had far less than 4 gigs of RAM. It was not that you needed 8 gigs of RAM to run 8 applications. That's never been the case. You don't have to watch every tech channel, every tech video that's talked about Stage Manager in order to say you've done your due diligence. You haven't seen every video either. You have. It's it's like saying, "Oh, you know how Mac OS works? Name every Mac." It's like you can't expect someone to watch every single video on every tech channel to say that's what due diligence requires. That's ridiculous. No, that argument is completely nonsensical. Ben Rayner, thank you for the super chat. He says, I have an iPad Air 3, and yeah, it sucks. It won't get Stage Manager, but sounds like it's not that great anyway. I get the software lock, but I wish it wasn't a thing. I think it absolutely could have. They just chose not to give it to it. They bizarrely rose the requirements of Stage Manager really, really high to make it sound like you need the M1 chip for it to work, but you don't. You really don't. Yeah, Michael's saying Rene Ritchie was making the case that the 2020 iPad had memory technical limitations, but again, that doesn't address how a Mac is able to do it with a fraction of the RAM. I agree. It's a stupid argument at this point. But thank you for the super chat, Karen. Which video is the skit of you choking to? I think it was my last video, the one on the 14-inch iPad Pro. You're just saying that you aren't willing to consider the other side, and actually, I just did. I'm saying you can't watch every tech video on the subject. Is my point. You haven't addressed my point. You can run 8 applications at the same time with less than 4 gigs of RAM. It's been done on Macs, and it's even more easy to do with Apple Silicon. What's your counter argument to that? I've not yet heard a single counterpoint to that argument, yet you're complaining that I'm not addressing the other. You're saying it's not possible, and then I'm pointing to my counterpoint, which is that yes, it is possible. I've seen it done. I've done it myself. You don't need swap if it's a fraction of the RAM, though. M1 exclusive Final Cut or with alternative aperture. Stage Managers does not need to be M1 exclusive. Yeah, I agree. Do you stream often? First time seeing you stream somehow. I used to stream a lot more frequently, and then I got sick, so I had to take a break. Yeah, Surface Pro has proper Windows, so iPads can get proper Mac OS. I think that'd be fair. iPad handles RAM differently. It's still. I've run multiple apps at the same time on my iPad with 4 gigs of RAM. It's just a different way to look at it. Could be the iPad battery life. You're still accessing more features and more multitasking capability when plugged in. So I just wish people would acknowledge that iPad OS is limiting because it doesn't even get optimized battery charging, that's on AirPods. The Apple Watch has it, the iPhone has it, the Mac has it. All of these Apple devices have it except the iPad. Don't even want to put a calculator app on it. They should allow Stage Manager on all iPads and just have external display support as the only exclusive. I could see it being limited by USB-C. They could say you need USB-C for it to work. Sorry, see, I didn't realize Renee Ritchie was mandatory. You can't talk on the subject until you've watched every video that's ever been made on the subject. Sorry, that argument makes me laugh too much. It's like you're not willing to move on in the discussion until you've watched a video on everyone's video. If you haven't watched it, you can't talk about it. It's not iPadOS that's the limitation. It's the apps that need to be more capable, and Apple won't put macOS on an iPad because that would let you bypass the App Store. I don't see why they're worried about bypassing the App Store if they do it on the Mac. They're pushing Macs harder than ever, and they're selling Macs for less money than iPads that you can run apps that aren't from the App Store. I know. See, he's not answering the question. He's just saying, Renee's talked about that, though. Have you seen his video? Because you don't seem to know what he said. You just said he addressed it. I don't know if you've seen it. Oh, my God. I've started to hate my iPad, too, honestly, just because my iPhone has gotten so capable and my Mac has gotten so capable, and my iPad has just kind of stayed stuck in 2015. No, I don't. I spend a lot of time making tech videos and making tech podcasts and doing tech live streams and interacting with people on Discord about it. So in my spare time, I don't watch that many tech videos, no. But that doesn't mean I'm not researching. There's other ways to research topics. C is still not answering the question, so I'm going to take that as evidence you haven't seen the video either. You're just saying, someone else addressed that problem. How did they address it? What did they say? They addressed it. How? They did, though. You didn't watch it. What did he say? No, I'm not interested in doing response videos. Renee can think what he wants. He can have that opinion that iPads should be limited and shouldn't get the stuff that other Apple devices get. He's welcome to think that. That's his opinion. I just happen to disagree, and I'm okay with that. Any phone is good nowadays. Most computers are pretty good too. Apple basically putting a phone CPU in their computers really isn't high tech. Well, it's the highest performance we've ever got out of ARM architecture before, to the point that it's now beating out the performance of the Intel and AMD processors that was and is still going into a lot of laptops. So I consider that pretty high tech. It just took a while to kind of optimize the software to run on ARM. But Michael says, my only argument is, why would Apple want you to only get more expensive iPad Pro instead of Mac when they can get you to get both? My argument is that's not what people are doing. And that logic would apply to the same reason you wouldn't want to put an iPod app or music on the iPhone. Don't put the music app on the iPhone. It would be better if you bought an iPhone and an iPod. They want you to buy two devices. Don't try to put music on the iPhone. It'd be better for you to buy two devices. Like, that argument makes no sense. Apple's always been very comfortable cannibalizing their own products if you're spending more money on that product. In the iPad Pro, if you try to spec for spec match it with any Mac, will always cost more. You can upsell people on 5G. You can upsell people on the Apple Pencil. And it doesn't even come with a keyboard and mouse, and it doesn't come with 256 gigs by default. So if you try to spec for spec match an iPad Pro with a MacBook Air, the iPad costs like $500 more. And there's plenty of room for upsell. And the iPad doesn't have a headphone jack. The iPad doesn't have as many ports. The iPad battery life wouldn't be as good. So I don't see how the heck people are thinking that the iPad would cannibalize sales. The people that buy the newest iPad Pro and they buy the newest MacBook Pro, they're still going to do both. Even if the iPad had macOS, it wouldn't get the M1 Pro or M1 Max chip. So if you wanted the faster silicon, those people are still going to buy the MacBook because that has the better battery life and the better ports. And then if they just want an iPad to use as a note-taking video thumbnail machine, they'll buy the best version of that because they have the money for it. Like, I don't see how most people, I think, are trying to decide, should I get this $1,000 MacBook or should I get this $1,000 iPad? I don't think there's that many people saying, I'm going to buy both because the iPad can't do what a Mac can. And if there are people buying both, which again is not most of the market, those people are still going to buy both because they're going to choose the advantages the Mac has and they're going to choose the advantages the iPad has. And the people with all the money buying both will continue to buy both. I don't think dual boot is going to change that. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. She says, imagine Apple approaches you and says, we will give you early new products that you can keep for life. We only want one thing in exchange, your soul. I'd be at a loss because I'm a ginger. I don't have a soul, so I would have nothing to give him. Shouldn't non-M1 iPads still have external monitor support without the black bars regardless of the stage manager restrictions? I don't know why both have to be tied together. That's another thing I don't get because you can run 3 apps simultaneously on a 4 gig of RAM iPad. I've done it myself. You can have 2 apps in split screen and another app in slide over, all interactable. You can be touching each one at the same time and have picture-in-picture going with 4 gigs of RAM. And you can even swipe up the dock and activate other apps that are still running in the background that haven't been closed. The only difference with Stage Manager is you can see all of those apps more evenly distributed. It's not like when you use slide over, it deactivates one of those apps. It's still running. It's just because of stupid iPad OS app layout, you can't have all of them evenly distributed between each other. That's the only thing Stage Manager does. So I'm not following. The Mac is a much bigger product category than the iPad, and the iPod only play music. The Mac does more than just one task. Well, yeah, so does the iPad. That's not exclusive to the Mac. My point is, if you did lose a Mac sale because of how good an iPad was, you would have generated more revenue. Like, you would have profited more off of the iPad selling. It's the same argument of saying, like, Apple shouldn't make an iPhone because then iPod sales would go down. It's like, yeah, but the iPhone costs more. So it's okay to cannibalize the iPod if those are what's replacing them because you can charge a lot more for those. Same thing with the iPad. You can charge a lot more for it. You can upsell people on more accessories. You can upsell people on 5G and the Apple Pencil and adapters and extenders, and you can't do that as much with a Mac. Yeah, I don't know who's running the Karen account, but thank you for the super chat. Sorry, Ace, the desk view on continuity camera just doesn't work. It's in beta for that reason, I guess. But Liam 2.0 says, have you tried center stage and portrait video? Yeah, center stage works. Portrait video has worked for me, but not today. For some reason, when I activate it, it doesn't do anything. But yeah. Also, studio light and center stage still works. So it tracks with your face. And obviously it uses the ultra-wide lens, so the quality goes down a bit, but it does technically work. Samsung can run an entire OS in DeX. Exactly, and that's on the ARM architecture. I feel like Jeff Bridges. Samsung built DeX in a cave with a bunch of scraps. And then the iPad OS team is like, I'm sorry, I'm not Samsung DeX. Yeah, I've read the internal statements that Apple has made. Renee's argument that the A12Z implementation doesn't meet Apple standards. Source was an internal Apple contact. He did say he hopes someone jailbreaks the feature to see if an explanation is true. That's not a counter argument to me. I could sit down and watch the whole video and say, he says that the A12Z can't do it. Like, that's not an argument. Apple, why can't this do it? Because we don't want it to. Oh! Silly me. I didn't think of that. I should have thought of such a thing. Meanwhile, Samsung phones with the old Snapdragon chips, very old Snapdragon chips, you could dock into an external monitor and have multiple applications running at the same time, a browser and the texting, you could do all this stuff. And yet an iPad with A12Z, which is still a very capable, very powerful chip, they're like, no, it's not possible. I completely agree, but that was the synopsis. Thank you, DJ. I side more on your side of that one as well. $6,000 MacBook Pro. Are you using your iPhone on your iMac to live stream? Do you like when the iPhone camera follows you from your iMac? Yeah, no, it's great. I know I've turned this live stream into a rant piece, but yeah, I very much love continuity camera, and I don't mean to be the Apple pessimist. You know, I still brand myself the Apple sheep because I am Team Apple, and I don't think that anybody outside of Apple has developed as good an ecosystem, as great a silicon, and just the way these products work together is incredible. The fact that I can just select iPhone camera on the list of webcam options when I'm in OBS is and I can get a video feed that looks this good, and I can just use that by default without an internet connection and without downloading an app, and with the display of the iPhone staying off. And what's the battery at now? Let me check. And I'm using universal control right now. I'm at 84%, so it's barely used any power. I'm using one mouse between my MacBook and my iMac. I can control two computers with that mouse, and I didn't have to download a program or have a switch on the mouse to toggle between apps. You know, I can just move the mouse over and it shows up on the iMac, and control the brightness and the volume from my MacBook. Like, the ecosystem is incredible, and it's undefeated in my view, and I love Apple hardware, and I love the software when it takes advantage of that hardware. I just feel like there's never been a greater gap between capability and performance than there is with the iPad. I've never seen a greater gap before in my life with Apple hardware. And I think that just like a lot of Star Wars fans complain about Star Wars, and I'm sure the Dodgers fans complain about the Dodgers, and you know, there's all kinds of things that you're on the team. You're supporting the brand, and you know, that's why you expect more. That's why you're hard on them. That's why I complain probably more at this point. I've probably posted more critical things on Apple than any other brand this year. You know, in the old days, I used to complain about Samsung and Google more often, but I came to expect less from them in the first place. So I just wasn't really interested or had much hope in complaining about them, because I just don't expect much from them. Whereas I expect more from Apple because I've used and appreciated so much of their software and hardware and utilized it in my daily life to the point that I'm like, yeah, I know what you're capable of making, Apple. I know how functional you can make devices. It's not like I'm asking Apple to put Windows or third-party stuff on their hardware. I'm advocating as to why they should put their own capable software on their great hardware. And I'm saying this would become the best 2-in-1 in the world if you made an iPad Pro that ran Mac OS. I'm not saying by default or that it only ran Mac OS. Like, it can still run iPad OS out of the box. I'm just saying put in a tiny little backdoor feature on the highest end trim. I don't care if it's only on the 2 terabyte option. Just something to make the most capable 2-in-1, and year after year they don't want to do it. They don't even want to give optimized battery charging to the dang thing, which to me is insulting. Like, especially when people use their iPad. You're advocating for people using their iPads with external monitors. Those types of setups mean that the iPad is getting power for extended periods of time. That's going to take the battery to 100% and leave it there for hours and hours and hours, which is not great for the battery health, which you can't measure on the iPad. And there's no optimized battery charging, so you can't keep the battery at 80% like you can on AirPods, like you can on the Apple Watch, like you can on the iPhone, like you can on the Mac. Literally everything else they make supports that, except the iPad. So it's because I'm such a big Apple fan that I'm so upset about that. And I think being critical of companies you love and support is important, because that's the only way they get better, is if you ask for things. If you're complacent and you just assume that everything needs to stay the same and they shouldn't update it or they shouldn't give it more, then it's not. It encourages things to not get better. Let's see. What FPS? It seems to cap out at 30. I can't get continuity camera to run at 60. Hopefully that would be updated in the future. Karen, thank you for the super chat. Says thoughts on the new USB-C double cable charger. I'm a bit confused. I mean, I like the concept of having more ports on Apple's chargers. I just don't know why they waited for the 35 watt brick. Like when you're checking out the MacBook Air, you can choose a 35 watt brick or a 35 watt brick with 2 USB-C ports, or a 61 watt brick or 67 watt brick with 1 USB-C port. I'm like, why can you only get 2 USB-C ports on the lower wattage brick? I would have thought you would want more. They gave me a 140 watt brick on my MacBook Pro, and it still only has 1 port. I would have thought the one with 140 watts, you would want to have 3, 4 ports to plug into. Like, I don't get it. It's fine. I'm in favor of it. Excuse me. But why just on the 35 watt brick? I don't get it. No, I've read it's 35 watts overall. I have not read that you can get 35 watts out of both ports simultaneously. Maybe you can get 35 watts out of each, but not at the same time. I don't know. No basic calculator app on iPad, yet you can use a scientific calculator app. Relying on the third party is not an excuse. It's like, yeah, that someone else can add that. It's like, okay, then half the features Apple adds to iOS shouldn't be there because you could say a third party's already done it. Let's see. My iPad is my main PC at work because the PCs at work are just unusable. Well, that's good. I'm glad it works for you. Apple should just give the user the choice. Yeah, I don't understand the problem with offering a choice. Recently added 2-factor authentication for my Discord account. Used one with iCloud Keychain. It's so nice. The keyboard suggestions have the code right there. I don't have to go to another app. I do like Keychain. That is helpful. Michael Mooney says, wait, you actually want to do stuff with your iPad? I know, it's crazy. Buy a Mac, right? No, that's not for that. I just don't get that argument of iPads aren't made for that, or iPads shouldn't be able to do that, when pretty much everything they've given the iPad over the past 5 years has been Mac stuff. It used to not have this keyboard and mouse setup, and now they gave it that. Used to not have Stage Manager, and now they gave it that. It used to not have Desktop Safari, they gave it that. Used to not have Thunderbolt, used to not have the same silicon they put in the Mac, and they gave it all these Mac things. And everyone's like, yeah, that's great. They gave the iPad even more Mac features. And it's like, how about some Pro apps, or how about just put Mac OS on there since it's running off the exact same chip? And they're like, no, buy a Mac for that. It's like, where were you when we were talking about keyboard and trackpad support coming to the iPad? And then they added that. We're like, no, if you want a mouse, you get a Mac. iPad's for touch. Comes out with keyboard and trackpad. Oh, that's great. Now there's more options if you want to do a keyboard. So I feel like if Apple does eventually cave and say, guess what? Now we're going to do Mac OS on the iPad. All these people complaining would be like, wow, that's a great option. Thanks for adding that. You know, they'd be suddenly totally okay with it. And they would be super comfortable all of a sudden. World's crispiest live stream. What is your next choice for video editors? Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve. I have experience with Premiere, which I was pretty happy with. I just didn't like the price. I've heard a lot of great things about DaVinci Resolve, though. I just have never gotten around to using it. I know it's not going to be as optimized as Final Cut is, and I know it's not going to export as quickly, so I don't really have much interest or care to try out DaVinci Resolve, because I know it's not going to speed up my workflow. But I know that you can get it for free, and I have several friends that use it that say it's very good. So I would probably try that if Apple took away Final Cut or turned it into a paid-only option, like you had to pay monthly to use it. I would probably try out Resolve, because I don't want to go back to Adobe. Yeah, let's see. This does look good. Thank you, Benjamin. I appreciate it. A12Z and A12X are very powerful chip. They're an expensive PC, not as powerful and power efficient as those chips. The RAM deficiency excuse is just a way to make Apple's vision of the iPad relevant. Yeah, it's funny when you can literally see what apps are running on your iPad. Do you want me to prove it? Let me get... I don't know if this is charged. I haven't used my iPad in over a week. It's got 47% battery. Okay, watch this. I can have Twitter, Spotify, Discord, and I'm going to add a couple more. How about YouTube? I can add that here. Yep, it's still running. Let me go to subscriptions here. Mail, I could add over. Let me see. Yep. Okay. I'll prove it to you right now before I hear people say, Macs don't have virtual memory swap, so it's not the same. Okay. I am holding a 2018 iPad Pro with 4 gigabytes of RAM. This was the 64 gigs of storage. I have Spotify running here. I have Discord running here. As you can see, they're both interactive, and Twitter at the same time. So it's not that one app is frozen in the background. All 3 are working, all 3 are interactive, and I can swipe on the home bar with slide over. YouTube is running. Didn't have to relaunch the app. Swipe again. Over is running, a photo editing app. I can adjust these, yada, yada, yada. I'm moving these apps around, moving these menus. Swipe again. Twitter is still open. Didn't have to relaunch the app. It didn't play the relaunch animation. YouTube is still there. Let me see. NASA spaceflight is live. Let's check it out. Livestream is playing. Can swipe back. Over is still launched. Hasn't closed. 2, 3, 4, 5 apps all running in system memory. None of them had to close, and I could keep going. The only thing preventing me from adding more apps, honestly, is I'm trying to find an app that doesn't dox me or give away my privacy. How about Safari? I'll add Safari to the mix. Okay, we have Mac Rumors open. Switch between. Okay, YouTube is still open and running. Safari is still open and running. Twitter is still open and running. I can check notifications. I could be playing music here. Don't want to get copyright claimed, but yeah, it's playing music. Safari's still open. Twitter is still open and interactive instantly right away. Safari's still there. I can switch between Safari tabs. All apps. 6 applications running at the same time with 4 gigs of RAM. So don't tell me 4 gigs of RAM isn't enough. iPad A12X chip doesn't have virtual memory swap, therefore it can't run 6 apps simultaneously. And okay, like if it's a more memory heavy app, sorry, that's a tongue twister. Memory heavy app. If it's a more memory heavy app, then you can close some more apps in the background on that version. But Apple probably raised the limit too high and said, well, because you can't run LumaFusion, Affinity Photo, and Lightroom all in Stage Manager at the same time, we're just not going to offer the feature at all to other iPads because they don't have 16 gigs of RAM. They don't have 16 gigs of RAM. You can try this yourself. You can test it on your own iPads. It's totally capable. Make a bunch on Safari Notes and Messages windows and make a bunch of split screen spaces. Yeah, I've seen people do it. They were posting about this on Reddit. If you go to the r/iPad Reddit, there were people running 6, 7 apps all simultaneously with their old iPads that didn't have the M1. But they still tell me, oh, it doesn't have the M1 chip, though. It can't handle it. Just because it can't run, like, several 8 gigs of RAM apps, because you can't run LumaFusion 8 times in a row, it's not worth it. Like, I don't get it. It's silly. Yeah, the A12Z and A12X are very powerful chips. They're not as powerful as M1, but they're still very capable. The RAM deficiency... Oh, sorry, I read that. Steve Jobs said no one would ever want video on an iPod. Then a few months later, he released the iPod Photo that also did video. That's funny. Yeah, Steve went back and forth a couple times. But I need to play Asphalt 8 while editing a video and checking my email. You know what's funny in all the Stage Manager demos I've seen? Is people struggle to actually come up with enough iPad apps to run at the same time. They're like, oh, I guess YouTube is running with like picture in picture. I guess I don't have premium, so. But yeah. Noah says my base iPad 2018 can do that with an A10. That the 2018 iPad Pro can run Xbox 360 or maybe even a bit better level console game. Oh yeah. No, I mean they took Fortnite off the App Store, but I don't know if you guys remember. You could play Fortnite at 120 FPS on this iPad. It ran pretty well. It was like a pretty high frame rate. I mean, it wasn't the highest quality settings, but you could play Fortnite at 120 FPS on here, and it worked. I did it many times with a game controller. I think it's fair that it couldn't run on the older than 2018 Pros like mine because it would be too laggy, and I don't think they want that, but at least 2020 could do it, maybe limited. Yeah, I think there's an easy way to scale it down personally. I don't know if their bizarre requirements of what Stage Manager is fair, but the reason their bizarre requirements of like it has to be able to run several versions of LumaFusion and Photoshop and Lightroom all simultaneously, that's the only way it could work is yeah, just like you said, it's an excuse for them to come up with features to get people to buy M1 iPads, because if I were to take a wild shot in the dark, I would say not that many people are buying them. I don't think that many people have justified buying M1 iPads. It's probably more popular here in the tech community than it is the average consumer. And even in the tech community, I don't find it particularly popular. So outside of the tech community, I bet the sales of M1 iPads is particularly low. And most people are just buying the budget iPad and the iPad mini. And because they're affordable and they get the job done and they work well. I know Apple has said multiple times on the record the budget iPad is the best seller. So the iPad with the A13 chip outsells all the others. So they're intentionally trying to come up with software features to make the M1 iPads feel more worth it, but they didn't choose the right ones in my opinion. Yeah, that was iPadOS 16, by the way. Runs fine, but I honestly haven't used my iPad much. So I can't say I've run into that many bugs because I just don't use it anymore. They want the apps to be able to instantly switch over, not even minor reload like I saw Twitter on your iPad do. It would do that regardless. I think it would do that even if you had it in Stage Manager. At least it does quick little reloads like that. I mean, it does quick little reloads like that on Stage Manager on the Mac, but again, acting like it can't even briefly for like a split of a second refresh is a stupid requirement. Just say, okay, if you do it on the older iPads, it takes 1/2 of a second to reload the app or whatever. But I didn't see it reload the app. If I experienced any stuttering with continuity camera, yeah, I have. It's dropped frames and lagged out several times. Okay, since I'm coming up near the end of the live stream here, let me go ahead and just try it. I'm going to activate desk view. When I do desk view, it instantly turns on center stage for no reason. And I can't show it. Maybe if I do display capture, it'll show it. Yeah, as you can see, it zooms in a bunch. Hold on. OBS wants to capture the whole thing. So when you activate desk view, it opens up this secondary app with a zoom thing, which no matter how I zoom, it looks bad. But yeah, it doesn't really capture what it's supposed to. Even if I moved the camera to exactly where the Belkin mount would put it, I don't know how to prove it, but okay, hold on. So like, I'm gonna hold the iPhone. Ooh, this is bizarrely high quality. I'll put the iPhone exactly where the mount would be, the Belkin mount. So it's basically touching the MacBook display right now, and that's what it looks like. So even if I adjust it, the MacBook display lid is closing. It's almost entirely closed. It still doesn't really work. So maybe it's supposed to be at a higher FOV, but okay, if I had a mount that attached it to the studio display, it would look like this. So let's just ignore what the mount would have to look like and say, okay, let's show the desktop view. I'm basically, the iPhone is basically completely straight down right now. This is not, this angle would not work at all. Like if I turn off display, that's what it would look like with center stage turned on. That's as high up as it'll look. And then that's what the desktop view would look like. So maybe if I zoom in, not really. Like, I can't show you the angle of the iPhone, but if I switch it back to not center stage, this is the angle. So, yeah, it really just does not work. The angle's off and the zoom doesn't position itself correctly, so it doesn't work. It's because the Belkin mount has an M1. That's what it is. If users noticed any slowdown, everyone would accuse Apple of slowing the older iPads down to incentivize M1 iPad sales. Do you see how they couldn't win in this situation? No, because I just proved that you can do it without the iPad slowing down. I just ran 6 apps with 4 gigs of memory. And every A12Z iPad has 6 gigs of RAM. So 50% more RAM, and I just ran a bunch of apps all at the same time without having to relaunch them. So, no. Sorry. You're not convincing me. Well, anyway, I could put this back in the tripod, but I'm going to end the live stream anyway. I need to figure out the distortion correction. I think the camera needs to be farther away. I literally had it like up here, and it was angled like this, and it still didn't look right. So yeah, however it's supposed to be working, it's not working yet. But I appreciate all the super chats and all you guys for tuning in today. This was a fun demo, and I love ranting. So I hope you guys have an excellent rest of your day, and expect more videos to come soon. Take care. Bye-bye.